First, I'd like to introduce two new members of the committee, or who actually be staff members. Sam Martin, who is our new Senate attorney, and Deborah Stamps, who I think is running out trying to get us a quorum. Janet Trotter retired, so she's our new committee assistant. Thank you all for being here today. The first bill I'd like to bring up is Senate Bill 2622, Mississippi Prior Authorization Reform Act. This should be no strange bill to the members of the committee. You might recall last year this bill came before us and it was introduced a little late in the session. So we had a quick hearing during the session, and it was determined that we wouldn't bring it up last year, that we would hold hearings in the summer to where we could get all parties involved and get their feedback. We did. We had a 2-hour hearing this summer on the issue. We also got the parties together, those in favor of the legislation, those that are against it, and those that liked it but wanted some changes made over the last 8 months. Many members of the committee attended National Conference of Insurance Legislators Conference in New Orleans, where we benefited this summer from hearing from the Commissioner of Insurance of Louisiana talk about their plan. At first, when this was introduced last year, Texas was the only state that had this. And we learned at NCOIL, we were able to hear from several other states who had developed this prior authorization. It's important to note that many of those plans included what's known as a gold card provision. And we heard that in our testimony about what the gold card is. We have taken the gold card legislation out of this bill. Gold card referred to allowing a physician to have a 6 month was typically the amount of time, a 6-month period of time where they did not have to get a prior authorization from the insurance company in order to perform procedures in their specialty. We have taken that out of this legislation. We made another change, part of the compromise. The penalties in the bill went from $250,000 to just $10,000 for violation of the act. Again, we got all the parties together, and what I'd like to discuss now is the compromise bill. There is nothing in this legislation that would reduce an insurance company's ability to list their prior authorizations. I really need to say that twice. There's nothing that reduces an insurance company's ability to list what they require a doctor to get for a prior authorization. Of course, prior authorization is the approval where they tell you before you do the procedure what you must do. There's this legislation sets up a portal, an internet portal, where the insurance companies will list the procedures that must have a prior authorization. If they're silent to an issue, then it does not require a prior authorization. A great example would be if you don't feel very well and you're not sure if you have the flu or COVID or a virus, you go to a medical provider, and that's typically does not require any kind of prior authorization. You get treated, you go home, and you get your medicines. But a more complicated procedure, maybe like obviously like colon cancer or hip replacement, those will require prior authorization. It's up to the insurance company to list what they want. When we had our hearings, we heard some complaints from both sides. We heard from the medical community that oftentimes when the doctors submit their prior approval requests, that they're delayed. They're not get timely answers. So we also wanted to deal with that in this legislation. You're going to hear in just a moment. They also said that they didn't oftentimes get the deal peer-to-peer. And we also heard from the insurance companies that oftentimes they didn't receive all the information. That's why the procedure might be delayed, because there was incomplete information. So by setting up this portal, we're going to have a list of all the documents and all the things that are necessary for the provider to give to the insurance company. This bill will help both parties. It involves transparency, uniformity, and timeliness. All right, the portal must be set up by January 1st of 2024. It's about 10 months away. If the procedure is denied coverage, the appeals, that's a year and a half away. If the procedure is denied coverage, the appeal process will be from doctor to doctor. So if there's a denial on a procedure, an orthopedic doctor will not be dealing with someone on the other side that's clerical and doesn't have the same knowledge on the subject. And the doctor dealing with an orthopedic issue will not be dealing with an ear, nose, and throat specialist. They'll be able to deal with someone who understands the issues, and we think that'll streamline the process. There's two types of medical issues. We define urgent medical issue and non-urgent. The urgent would be something that must be responded to within 24 hours after all information is received by the healthcare provider. If the doctor is tardy on providing the information, then the 24-hour period does not start until the insurance company gets all the information. Non-urgent issues allow 2 working days before the prior authorization must be granted. are addressed, addressed. Good examples of those would be like physical therapy, maybe an ulcer or gallbladder situation. The bill has a reporting process by June 1st of 2024 and each June thereafter that we want to know the number of prior authorizations that were requested, the number of prior authorization requests that were denied, the number of appeals, the number of adverse determinations reversed on an appeal, the 10 most often prior authorizations that were denied and the reason they were denied, and the number of procedures not paid on audit. We have situations where a prior authorization can be granted and the procedures performed and the insurance company on a tail end review denies payment. So we would like to know, and that was part of the reason for the committee substitute. We added that in there. We'd like to track any denials on a post procedure. It's known as the Mississippi Prior Authorization Reform Act. We think it's a good consumer bill. I'll be glad to yield any questions. Senator. Question, Senator McClendon.
Mr. Chairman, I submit that title sufficient do pass, committee substitute.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That bill will be reported. Senate Bill 2227, Federal Home Loan Banks. We'd like to recognize Eric Harr for being here with us today. He's from the Federal Home Loan Bank of Dallas. Senator McClendon is going to introduce, describe the bill, and if we have any questions, Mr. Harr will be available.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Senate Bill 2227, Federal Home Loan Banks, provides certain rights and procedures regarding collateral on those loans. I know most of you probably knew, but I didn't. Did some research on Federal Home Loan Bank system. It's part of an 11 regional banks. We are in the Dallas branch. After the Great Depression, the Federal Home Loan Banks were created under the Federal Home Loan Bank Act of 1932. And it's to support mortgage loans, community investment, and housing development. The Federal Home Loan Bank of Dallas covers our region, which includes Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, Texas, and New Mexico, and at present serves approximately 803 members, financial institutions, and insurance companies in our region. Each Federal Home Loan Bank is a separate cooperative, is owned by each member, whether it be a bank, insurance company, whatnot. And one of the main reasons and the main purposes of the Federal Home Loan Bank is to provide advances or loans to their members, both banks and insurance companies. Insurance companies generally use these advances as a source of additional liquidity when needed. We have a hurricane catastrophic event when a number of simultaneous insurance claims happen. It is, however, legally required that these advances or loans by Federal Home Loan Bank be fully guaranteed or collateralized by one or more specific types of assets of its members. In the event of a bankruptcy of a member due to catastrophic losses, in accordance with existing federal bank law now, the Federal Home Loan Banks are afforded a special protection. This protection is a federal law regarding federal insured depositors. Funding provided by FHLBs is not subject to stay or avoidable transfer provision. And that's hence where we have to do a little adjusting in what we have now in Mississippi. Federal Home Loan Bank in Dallas is seeking to amend this state law, as 28 other states have already done. It makes it clear that a receiver shall not deny or delay the Federal Home Loan Bank from accessing collateral. It creates a framework for a receiver and the Federal Home Loan Bank to determine a mutually favorable outcome for both, and allow the Federal Home Loan Bank to continue lending to its insurers with more favorable collateral terms. Three main companies that this will affect in Mississippi: Southern Farm Bureau Life Insurance Company, Southern Farm Bureau Casualty Insurance Company, as well as AmFirst Insurance Company. More Mississippi insurers could join and borrow if this legislation is passed. And I will open it up to questions. And Mr. Harr, would you like to say a little bit about the Federal Home Loan Bank?
I'm sorry, that allows us to lend to insurance companies at low rates. So you are correct that this law would make it clear that a home loan bank shall not be prohibited from accessing collateral due to the Federal Home Loan Bank. I'll add that we are a government-sponsored enterprise created by Congress in the 1930s, and we're under federal statute and certain requirements that make this legislation very appropriate.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since this is a federal home loan bank, why is not there federal laws that address all of these issues?
Senator, excellent question. When we make a loan to a bank or a credit union, federal law does apply, and we have no problems accessing the collateral that they have pledged to us. But because insurance is governed at the state level, we need to go state by state to make this much more clear. I can expand on that if you like, but the federal protections do not apply when we lend money to an insurance company.
And that's stated in the federal statute.
It's stated by omission. It is very clear that when we lend to a bank or credit union, the protections apply, but it is not described in federal statute regarding insurance companies because of the state law application.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Any other questions? You have a motion, Senator McClendon?
Title sufficient, do pass.
Motion's title sufficient to pass Senate Bill 2227. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? That bill will be reported.
Thank you, Mr. Har.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Har. Senate Bill 2228, pet insurance. This is another issue that shouldn't be strange to you because we had hearings on it last summer. What we're dealing with is a national model that's put out by the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. And if you don't think it's big business, I went in my veterinary clinic and they had brochures all over the place for pet insurance. The industry has 2.8 billion in premiums, and that's up 30% over the previous year. So it's something that's really growing, and there's over 4 million insured pets in the United States. The ironic thing about legislation in Mississippi is right now, in order to sell pet insurance, you do it through a property and casualty license. So what we're doing is opening up this up to where health insurance and life insurance agents can settle it as well, which makes sense. And again, this is a model act from NAIC. And of course, it would cover any ailments, broken bones, cancer, and it's up to the insurance companies to set their own rates. You know, you go online, I believe it or not, I got an email from Costco and they're even in this business. And I put the details of my dog in there and that premium for my pet would have been about $45. Any questions on this legislation? Senator Blackwell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you say they set the rate so it doesn't go through the commissioner's office?
They don't, the commissioner would not regulate the rates. The commissioner is going to set up regulations to make it consistent where we have a consistent set of laws throughout the country. And and no one would force the company to set up any sort of network. The way it works right now is if you have a pet, it's not like health insurance where you would have a network. You could take your pet to any veterinary clinic. If you happen to be out of town, you can take to any veterinary clinic, then you're reimbursed by your pet insurance company for the costs associated with your plan.
All right, thank you.
Senator Kirby.
I'm trying to determine or find what determines a pet.
Well, what I've been told is the most common ones, it could be up to the company, I guess, but the dogs, cats, believe it or not, birds, and what was the other
Goldfish.
one? What was the fourth one? Reptiles? Mostly dogs and cats.
So it's up to the company.
Be up to the company. If they wanted to ride a hamster, they free to do it,
Or a goldfish.
or a goldfish. Okay, any other questions? Senator Blackman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see here on line 35 about the definition of pre-existing condition. So we are allowing for pre-existing conditions to be covered just like we do for health insurance.
Yeah, that is a wonderful question. And I looked at one of the brochures, I believe it or not, my dog had a torn ACL. And that the good folks at Mississippi State got $5,000 from me on that, fixing that torn ACL on the dog. There's, in this particular policy, I read where for that specific torn ACL, it specifically listed here that they would not allow coverage until after 1 year waiting period. It'd be up to the insurance companies to dictate their own terms. But that's a very expensive,
Okay, my other question is, and I guess it's related to what Senator Blackwell was saying. We're allowing the insurance commissioner to establish rules and regulations. And presently, the insurance commissioner for the health and life and all of these property, those entities have to submit rate increase applications, and then the insurance commissioner will make a determination as to whether they can increase it. And he may say they can, he may say they can't, he may say they can only increase it by X amount of dollars. So why are we not prohibiting, allowing the insurance commissioner to do the same? That's what's done with these others. So that if we're dealing with trying to protect the consumer and large swings and rates.
Okay, well, we're giving the insurance commissioner the authority to regulate that. Commissioner, would you address that specifically about rates? Kim Causey, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Senator. Pet insurance is under the line of property and casualty, but it's also under property and casualty is under inland marine. We have never regulated the rates for inland marine. That's just one of those things that we just don't regulate. So since it falls under that category, we would not be regulating those rates. Does that answer your question?
Why is it under inland marine?
That's just the category that it falls under in every state. Okay.
All right, we have before us Senate Bill 2228. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? That bill will be reported. Okay, this is an interesting one. Fire insurance policies exclude provisions related therefore applying to builder's risk policies. Just shows that you can sometimes never be amazed at what the courts would do. The Southern District Court ruled in the case. First, let me explain what a builder's risk policy is. You're building a new house. A builder's risk policy covers the construction of that house until it's completed and the keys are handed over to the homeowner, and then you would get your permanent property and casualty policy. During the process, you're covering anything that might go wrong during the construction process. A good example would be once the house is framed, if a windstorm came through or a fire developed and the windstorm blew the framing to the ground, under a builder's risk policy, you would be made whole. So you would get your insurance company would pay you the proceeds to get that builder and the builder's profit to reframe that house. Well, a judge in a case under the valued policy law, which says, a valued policy law says that if you have a loss on a $300,000 house, total loss through a fire or something, then they must pay the $300,000. And this judge ruled that the builder's risk policy applied to valued policy laws, such that if you had spent $20,000 framing the house and it burned down, the insurance company would not pay the $20,000 to make you whole, but would pay the full value of $300,000 of the policy. And we see that there could be great opportunities for fraud in that. If a builder were having a little difficulty and could partially frame a house, and then when those oily rags start rubbing together and the fire started during the night and it burned down, they would be able to collect the full premium on that. So this is to clear that up, such that builder's risk policies do not fall under the valued policy law. Any other questions? Any questions, period? Shame we have to be doing this, but that's what a judge ruled, so we're reacting. Motion.
Title sufficient do pass.
Motion is title sufficient to pass on Senate Bill 2617. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, Senator Blackwell, Senator Bill 2224, please. Yeah, you recognize. Bob Williams, thank you for being here, Bob.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. So this bill is kind of broken up into what I thought three sections. The first portion of it prohibits an insurer from setting a maximum dollar amount or reimbursement for non-invasive ventilation or ventilation treatment properly ordered by a physician and being used in the appropriate care setting. So this is further protection for consumers to make sure that there's not a dollar amount on that reimbursement. No questions on that. I'm going to go to the second portion of this bill. Addresses the commissioner being able to adopt rules and regulations to address any inequalities and provider reimbursements paid by a plan administrator, a healthcare company, for healthcare claims incurred by the insured in Mississippi. So for us to understand this, I kind of want to go over what the Blue Card program is. Many of you may be familiar with it, but I want to walk through this. So Blue Card is a national program that enables policyholders and members of a Blue Cross plan to obtain healthcare service benefits while they're traveling or they're living in another Blue Cross plan service area. The Blue Cross companies are independent corporations. They are not like United Healthcare, for example. There's one large company. So these Blue Cross plans participate in this Blue Card program. So I'd like to give you an example of how this works. I live in Mississippi, but I work for a company in Memphis, Tennessee. My insurance coverage is with my employer in Tennessee through Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Tennessee. I live in Mississippi and I need to see a cardiologist in Jackson, Mississippi, who is in the Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Mississippi's network of providers. Although I am seeing a cardiologist in Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Mississippi's network, my cardiologist is considered part of Tennessee's network through the Blue Card program. And Tennessee receives the benefit of Blue Cross and Blue Shield's provider network because of the way this is set up. So here's the issue that comes into play that this legislation needs to address. When my local cardiologist is reimbursed by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Mississippi through their negotiated rate, this rate can be lower than what Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Tennessee would have reimbursed a cardiologist in Tennessee. Providers in Mississippi in some cases are receiving lower reimbursement rates through the Blue Card program. While Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Tennessee is benefiting from the lower reimbursement rates through Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Mississippi, our cardiologist is being paid less. So what this legislation would allow is the commissioner to be able to set up rules and regulations. We would get together with the stakeholders, be able to get additional data and look into this further in order to protect our providers in Mississippi. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions.
Senator Harkins.
So how would this work if, I guess you gave an example of a person living in Mississippi that works for a company out of Tennessee that has a Tennessee Blue Cross policy. What about a person in Mississippi with a Mississippi Blue Cross policy that goes out of state and needs to see a cardiologist or needs to seek treatment for something? How is that impacted by this?
Well, it would be just the reverse. They would get the benefit of going to Tennessee. But in that case, we need to look and see, is that situation affected negatively like we know it is in Mississippi?
Well, what about when Blue Cross of Mississippi doesn't recognize certain treatments that other Blue Crosses across the country will recognize? How does that work?
Chairman, if I may address that. Senator, what happens is Blue Cross network is adopted. So for an example, let's say that I needed to go to Youngstown, Blue Cross ministry this year.
Mhm.
Can y'all hear me? They may not let you go to Indiana because they're not in the Mississippi network. But if you went across the border, say to Birmingham, and use that policy in Alabama because of the position there, they would say to Indiana. Does that make sense to you? And in many cases, what happens is Mississippi's Blue Cross will reimburse for floor rate and will be reimbursed by Blue Cross. all more than maybe probably $500,000 policy difference. My mistake, let's do the math.
Yeah.
Billion dollars. And somewhere you got that. That's essentially that.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Thank you.
Go on to the third portion of the bill.
Okay.
Okay, so the third portion of the bill addresses provisions in section 83-9-5 dealing with clean claim process. Currently, under our law, an insurance company in Mississippi must pay a clean claim that is submitted electronically by a medical provider in 25 days or within 35 days if the claim is hard copy. Sometimes claim payments are delayed to the medical providers because the insurance companies indicate the claim is not clean. A claim may be considered not clean if the insurance company needs additional information. In certain instances, the insurance companies may not make it clear to the providers what information is needed, and this can cause delay in information going back and forth. To assist providers with this process, the bill adds language indicating that upon request by the medical provider, the insurance company must provide a list of information and documentation on the front end required for the claim to be considered clean. So then again, this protects our providers and our consumers. Any questions on that part? Okay, also current language in our law also requires a medical provider to submit a claim within 30 days of the date of the original service to the patient in order for it to be considered clean. The problem with that is the original date of service does not mean that the treatment and services are complete. The revised language will allow the medical provider to submit the claim within 30 days after the date of the completion of the services and treatment in order to be considered a clean claim. Therefore, they don't miss that 30-day period and they are able to get paid. Okay, and then the last portion is current language in the law indicates that the commissioner may adopt rules and regulations necessary to ensure compliance with this subsection. The subsection is addressing subsection D, administrative penalties only. We would like to see that language revised to address all the provisions of section 83-9-5, not just subsection D. And the reason for this is 83-9-5 addresses all the required provisions to be included in health insurance policy language. And this would allow the commissioner to have meetings with stakeholders and look at this if there are issues and problems we need to address. Any questions?
Okay, do we have a motion? Okay, did you have a question, Senator Boyd? Okay, a motion is title sufficient to pass. Committee substitute, Senate Bill 2224. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? That bill will be reported. Senate Bill 2615 is another piece of reactionary legislation that's necessary because of the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act has classified some contract workers as regular employees and require the employer to offer them health insurance. And our state health insurance plan does not recognize contract workers for our network. This has resulted in millions of dollars of fines to the state from the IRS. Most of the fines are coming in our healthcare field. Between Boswell Regional Mental Health Center and the Department of Health, $9 million of the $13 million in fines that were reported last year have occurred. So in order to avoid future penalties, we need this legislation to offer minimal essential coverage for personnel who work at least 30 hours per week, with the important language being on line 62 that the contractor shall pay 100% of the premium. It has to be offered to the contract worker. The worker pays 100%, no expense to be paid for by the employer, which is the state agency. The Department of Finance and Administration has recommended this. This is a stopgap measure to stop these fines we're getting from the IRS. No cost to the state. The contract worker can pay the same amount we do for the policy. Senator Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would this set up any sort of precedent where these contract people would participate in PERS?
None that I'm aware of. This is the code section for for the state health plan.
All right, I was just wondering, us making an allowance so that they can have health insurance, if that,
If you look at the definition on line 29. Okay. On line 44 to 48, it says contract personnel, whether classified as contract workers or independent contractors, shall not be deemed state service or non-state service employees of the state of Mississippi and should not be able to participate in the public employees retirement system.
thank you, sir.
That clears it up right there. Thank you, council. Any other questions, Senator Blackman? Okay, question for Senator Blackman, Senator Horn.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, now the purpose of this is to prevent the penalties that have been being imposed because these contract workers have been being deemed employees.
Yes.
Okay, so now what happens if the contract worker refuses to purchase the insurance?
My understanding, it just has to be offered to them. And there's a definition for full-time workers. Another way an agency can control this is if the contract worker, works 30 hours or less. So our state agencies can be more cognizant of the hours that they're allowing contractors to work. So the first thing would be to keep them below the 30 hours. But like at Boswell Mental Health Center is a good example. If somebody couldn't be at work and they have to meet certain stipulation for number of employees per mental health patients, and they had to call a contract worker in, we don't want them saying, oh my gosh, I can't come. I've already worked 29 hours. So if they offer that policy to them, then they'll be fine.
Okay, but as I understand the IRS rules, don't they have a definition of what basically a contract worker is considered an independent contract? And they have a definition of what is an independent contract. And if
But
these individuals we're saying are contract workers, they're coming to our business and we're telling them what to do, and they're using our materials and supplies, and would not the IRS say they're an employee?
You've added another variable to this, is the Affordable Care Act. Affordable Care Act is the one dictating this. Council?
But it's IRS that's saying who is what, isn't it?
Just the key is that we have to offer the insurance to satisfy the terms of the Affordable Care Act. The other thing to do would be to call your congressmen or senators and before Tuesday, get them to change the law, and then we won't have to bring this up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
But this will,
Mr. Martin,
we've
Attorney
spent-
Martin.
we've spent $40 million in fines over 3 years. So this will help the state. Okay, and Senator Horn had a motion, title sufficient to pass. Senator Horn? Okay. Title sufficient to pass, Senate Bill 2615. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Senate Bill, that bill will be reported. Senate Bill 2649, Senator Boyd.
Whereas this is a bill by Senator DeBoard, who made us aware of a situation where there was a spouse of a military veteran that somebody that was active duty, and that individual passed away. The spouse was a minor according to the insurance terms. And so she was left as a 20-year-old with a child and no way to take advantage of that life insurance policy that they had, and even to bury her husband. So Senator Barr here has proposed a piece of legislation that would allow, and it's a very narrow piece of legislation, it would allow that a spouse of a member or veteran of the United States Air Force Armed Forces, sorry, that minor would be able to be, that they married or unmarried and at least 18 years of old, or it says legally emancipation, would be entitled to the benefits of such policy, and that you would remove the minority for the purposes of this. So, and it shall, the removal of the minority shall extend to the right to file suit under the policy and receive any settlements under the proceed. So it's a pretty straightforward act. It's going to allow those that are the beneficiaries of those policies that might be minors to lower that to 18 instead of 21. So are there any questions? Yeah, succinct. Any other questions? Mr. Chairman, for a motion,
Yes, you recognize.
title sufficient, do pass.
Committee sub.
Committee sub,
Senate Bill 2649, motion is title sufficient to pass. Committee substitute. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed to that? Okay, last on our item today came from the Lieutenant Governor this morning. Senate Bill 2623, this is important to him. And maybe all senators represented here today have had some concerns about our state health plan. Maybe you've heard from some people in your district that want to know why the rates are going up 6% this year and 7% next year. They want specific answers. Maybe they want to discuss why the deductible has changed. Maybe they've seen rates in other states and they want to compare our rates to those in other states and see if we're getting the best bang for our buck. So this legislation would create the Mississippi State and School Employees Life and Health Insurance Plan Task Force to meet this summer and to discuss issues such as the financial state of the health plan, the plan for future rate increases, a comparison of our state plan with other plans in southern states. Lines 37 through 52 list who the members of the committee shall be. And the appointments shall be made no later than 30 days after the effective date of the act. And this legislation calls for the task force to meet this summer and create a response back to the findings back on before November 1st of 2023.
Question.
Senator Kirby.
I just want to make sure that this bill doesn't replace the existing committee that we have now.
We do have an oversight management board. That's in statute. This would not replace them in any way whatsoever. This is a newly created study committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Blackman, you had a motion. Motion is title sufficient to pass Senate Bill 2623. All in favor, say aye.
aye.
Aye. Is there any business to come, business to come before us?
Rise and report.
All right, Secretary Board has a motion. We rise and report. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We stand adjourned.
Just did 3 committees.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm good. So,
order.